My name is Eleanor Washington. I'm a 58-year-old black woman, and 3 days ago I discovered that my adopted daughter has been planning to murder me and my husband for over 2 years. She didn't use a gun. She didn't use poison. She used something much more cruel, the truth. You see, my husband Robert has early-stage Alzheimer's, and during his confused episodes, he's been confessing to murders that happened 30 years ago, murders that I thought were just delusions. But they weren't delusions. They were memories. Perfect, detailed memories of the night he killed our daughter's entire birth family. And Sophia. Sophia has been recording every single confession. If you think this story is about a family torn apart by lies, you're right. But it's also about something else. It's about how love can survive even the most unforgivable truths. Because in 40 minutes, you'll understand why I chose to forgive the daughter who tried to destroy me, and why she chose to forgive the father who murdered her family. But first, let me tell you about the morning I realized my perfect life was built on blood. It started 3 weeks ago, on what should have been an ordinary Saturday morning in our suburban Atlanta home. Robert and I were preparing for our annual trip to visit my sister Linda in the North Georgia mountains. We'd been making this trip every October for 15 years, just the two of us, enjoying the fall foliage and each other's company. But this year, something was different. Sophia had been asking strange questions about the trip for weeks. Not the usual drive-safe concerns. Something darker. "You sure you don't want company this year?" she had asked for the 3rd time that week. "Honey, you hate long car rides. You always have." "I know, but with Dad's condition getting worse." She was right about Robert's condition. The Alzheimer's was progressing faster than we'd hoped. But he still had good days, and this was supposed to be one of them. "We'll be fine," I assured her. "It's only a 3-hour drive." But Sophia kept pressing. "What if something happens? What if Dad gets confused while you're driving? Then I'll pull over and call you. What if you can't? What if you're in an area with no cell service?" Her persistence was starting to worry me. Sophia had always been protective, but this felt different, more urgent. "Sophia, what's really going on? You're acting like you expect something terrible to happen." She looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "I just have a bad feeling about this trip, Mom." "Can't you postpone it? We've had these reservations for months. Linda is expecting us." "Then let Marcus check your car first. Make sure everything's safe." That should have been my first warning. Sophia suggesting that Marcus inspect our car was unusual. He was an electrician, not a mechanic. And our car had just passed its annual inspection 2 months earlier. But I agreed because it seemed to calm her down. Marcus arrived at our house at 7 that morning, 2 hours before we were supposed to leave. He went straight to our garage and spent over an hour under the hood of our Honda Accord. I watched him through the kitchen window while I packed our overnight bag. He wasn't doing a general inspection. He was focused on something specific, working with tools he had brought from home. When he finally emerged, his hands were dirty, and he looked satisfied. "Everything looks good," he announced. "But I did notice your brake fluid was a little low. I topped it off for you." "Thank you," Robert said. That was thoughtful. But something about Marcus's demeanor bothered me. He seemed nervous, like he was hiding something. The second warning came as we were loading the car. Sophia kept checking her phone. Not casually, obsessively, like she was waiting for something important. "Expecting a call?" I asked. "Just work stuff," she replied, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. The 3rd warning was the most obvious, but I missed it completely. As we were saying goodbye, Sophia hugged us both longer than usual. Much longer, like she was saying goodbye forever. "I love you both so much," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "We love you too, sweetheart. We'll see you tomorrow night." But she held on for another moment, and when she finally let go, I saw something in her expression that I couldn't identify at the time. It looked like grief. We pulled out of the driveway at exactly 9 o'clock, waving goodbye to Sophia and Marcus, who stood in our doorway watching us leave. I didn't know it then, but they were waiting to see if we would make it out of the neighborhood alive. The drive started normally enough. Robert was having a good day, alert and conversational. We talked about the changing leaves, about Sophia's kids, about our plans for the weekend. But about 30 minutes into the drive, Robert started getting agitated. "Eleanor," he said quietly, "I keep having these memories. About Sophia's adoption. About what happened after we brought her home." "What kind of memories?" "Bad ones. Really bad ones. But they feel so real." This wasn't unusual. Robert's Alzheimer's often caused him to have vivid dreams and confused memories. But lately, these episodes had been getting more frequent and more detailed. "Tell me about them," I said, thinking it might help to talk through his confusion. "I keep seeing the Henderson family, Sophia's birth family, but not from when we met them for the adoption. From after." "After what?" Robert was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the passing landscape. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. "After I killed them." I nearly swerved off the road. "Robert, what are you talking about?" 3 weeks after we brought Sophia home, James Henderson called me at work. He was crying. He said they had made a mistake, that they wanted Sophia back. "That's impossible. The adoption was final." That's what I told him. But he said they didn't care about the legalities. They were coming to get their daughter whether we agreed or not. I felt a chill run down my spine. "Robert, this is just another confused memory. The Hendersons never contacted us after the adoption." "They did, Eleanor. James said they had already bought bus tickets. They were coming that Sunday morning to take Sophia away from us." "And what did you do in this memory?" Robert turned to look at me, and I saw something in his eyes that terrified me. Guilt. Deep, soul-crushing guilt. I made sure they couldn't take her away from us. "How?" "I drove to Millbrook that Saturday night. I told you I was checking on a construction site that was having problems." I remembered that night. Robert had left around 8 p.m., saying there was an emergency at one of his job sites. He had come home around 3 in the morning, exhausted and dirty. I went to their house with a gun. I was just going to scare them, make them understand that Sophia was better off with us. "Robert, stop. This isn't real. This is just your mind creating stories." "But James was waiting for me. He met me at the door with a baseball bat, like he had been expecting trouble. He called me a child stealer, said he was going to make sure everyone knew what kind of people we were." Robert's voice was getting stronger, more detailed. This wasn't the confused rambling I was used to. This was clear, specific, consistent. "So I shot him, right there on the front porch. When Maria and the 2 older children came running to see what had happened, I shot them too. I couldn't let them identify me. I couldn't let them call the police." I pulled the car over to the side of the road, my hands shaking. "Robert, please stop. You're scaring me. I killed an entire family, Eleanor, because I couldn't bear to lose our daughter. How did you make it look like a robbery?" The question came out before I could stop myself. Why was I asking for details about a delusion? I took some jewelry, some cash from Maria's purse, broke a few things to make it look like a struggle. The police found signs of forced entry, missing valuables. They assumed it was a home invasion gone wrong. I stared at my husband of 35 years, the man I thought I knew better than anyone, and realized I was looking at a stranger. "And you never told me. How could I? How could I tell the woman I love that our happiness was built on the graves of innocent people?" We sat there on the side of the mountain road, the engine idling, while I tried to process what Robert had told me. "This isn't real," I said finally. "This is just the Alzheimer's creating false memories." "Then why do I remember every detail? The smell of Maria's perfume, the sound James made when the bullet hit him, the way the youngest boy tried to hide under his bed. Because your mind is very good at creating convincing stories. Or because it really happened." I put the car back in drive and continued up the mountain, but my mind was reeling. Robert's story was too detailed, too consistent to be a simple delusion. But it was also too horrible to be true. Wasn't it? We drove the rest of the way to Linda's house in relative silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed between us. When we arrived at Linda's mountain cabin, she greeted us with her usual warmth and enthusiasm. But I could barely focus on her chatter about the beautiful fall weather and her plans for our weekend together. All I could think about was Robert's confession and the terrible possibility that it might be true. That night, as Robert slept beside me in Linda's guest room, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of what I had heard. If Robert's story was true, then our entire life together was built on blood and lies. Sophia was the daughter of people we had murdered. Our happiness had come at the cost of an entire family's lives. But if it wasn't true, then my husband's mind was deteriorating faster than I had realized, and I was losing him to a disease that was stealing his memories and replacing them with nightmares. Either way, our life as I knew it was over. The next morning, Linda noticed my distraction immediately. "Eleanor, you look like you didn't sleep at all. Is everything okay? Robert had another episode yesterday, a bad one." "What kind of episode?" I hesitated. How could I tell my sister that my husband had confessed to mass murder? How could I explain that I was starting to wonder if it might be true? He's been having very vivid memories about Sophia's adoption, but they're disturbing. Disturbing how? He thinks he did something terrible to her birth family. Something violent. Linda sat down beside me on her porch swing, her expression serious. "Eleanor, you know that's not real, right? The doctors told you that Alzheimer's patients often have elaborate fantasies." "I know. But these aren't random fantasies. They're detailed, consistent, specific, and they explain things that never made sense before." "What kind of things?" Why the Henderson family never contacted us after the adoption. Why Robert was so paranoid about anyone finding out where Sophia came from. Why he always changed the subject when I suggested we try to find Sophia's birth family when she got older. Those could all have innocent explanations. They could. But what if they don't? Linda was quiet for a moment, studying my face. "Eleanor, what are you really asking me?" "I'm asking if you think it's possible that the man I've been married to for 35 years is a murderer." "No. Absolutely not. Robert is one of the gentlest men I've ever known. He wouldn't hurt a fly. But what if he thought he was protecting Sophia? What if he thought he was protecting our family? Even then, Robert isn't capable of violence." But as I sat there on Linda's porch, watching my husband tend to her garden with the same gentle hands that had raised Sophia, I wasn't so sure anymore. Because love can make people do terrible things. And the love Robert felt for Sophia was fierce, protective, absolute. If someone had threatened to take her away from us, what lengths would he have gone to stop them? We cut our trip short and drove home that afternoon. I told Linda that Robert wasn't feeling well, but the truth was that I needed to get home and find out if my husband's confessions were real or imagined. The drive home was tense. Robert seemed to sense my suspicion and withdrew into himself. We barely spoke for the entire 3 hours. When we pulled into our driveway, Sophia and Marcus were waiting for us on the front porch. They looked surprised to see us. "You're home early," Sophia said, hugging us both. "Is everything okay?" "Dad wasn't feeling well," I replied, watching her face carefully for any reaction. "What kind of not feeling well?" "Just tired. The drive was harder on him than we expected." But I could see something in Sophia's eyes. Relief? Disappointment? I couldn't tell. That night, after Robert had gone to bed, I did something I had never done before in 35 years of marriage. I searched through his things. I started with his desk in the home office, looking through old papers, receipts, anything that might give me a clue about what had really happened 30 years ago. I found his old appointment books, the ones he had kept meticulously during his construction business days. I flipped to October 1993, the month after Sophia's adoption. There it was. October 23, 1993. Emergency, Millbrook site. The same date Robert had mentioned in his confession. My hands were shaking as I continued searching. In the back of his filing cabinet, behind years of tax returns and business documents, I found a small metal box I had never seen before. Inside the box were newspaper clippings, all from the Millbrook Gazette, all from late October 1993. Family of 5 murdered in home invasion. Henderson family laid to rest. Police seek leads in brutal Millbrook murders. I read every article with growing horror. James and Maria Henderson, ages 34 and 32. Their 3 children, Michael, 8, David, 6, and baby Sophia, who had been recently placed for adoption with a loving family in Atlanta. The details matched Robert's confession perfectly. The family had been shot in their home during what appeared to be a robbery. Jewelry and cash were missing. There were no witnesses, no suspects, no leads. The case had gone cold within months. I sat there in Robert's office at 2 a.m, surrounded by evidence that my husband was a murderer, and tried to figure out what to do next. Should I call the police? Should I confront Robert? Should I tell Sophia? Sophia. My daughter was the sole survivor of a family massacre. She was living with the man who had killed her parents and siblings. She had been raised by her family's murderer, and she had no idea. Or did she? The next morning, I watched Sophia differently. I studied her face, her mannerisms, her interactions with Robert. Was there any sign that she knew the truth? She seemed normal, loving, attentive, concerned about Robert's health. She brought him his favorite coffee, helped him with his medication, laughed at his jokes. If she knew that he had murdered her birth family, she was an incredible actress. But then I remembered something. Sophia had been asking questions about her adoption for months. Not casual curiosity, specific, probing questions. "Do you ever wonder what happened to them?" she had asked just a few weeks earlier. The Hendersons? At the time, I had assumed she meant whether they were doing well, whether they had other children, whether they ever thought about her. But what if she meant something else? What if she was asking whether we knew they were dead? I decided to test her. "Sophia," I said, when she came to visit that afternoon, "your father had another episode yesterday. He was talking about your birth family again." "What did he say?" "He seemed to think something bad had happened to them, something violent." Sophia's expression didn't change, but I noticed her hands tighten slightly around her coffee cup. "What kind of violent?" "He thought they had been murdered. Isn't that terrible? His mind is creating such dark fantasies." "That is terrible," Sophia agreed, but her voice sounded flat, emotionless. "I was thinking maybe we should try to find them, your birth family, just to put his mind at ease. Show him that they're alive and well." Now Sophia's expression did change. Just slightly, but I caught it. A flicker of something. Fear? Anger? "I don't think that's a good idea, Mom." "Why not?" "Because what if they don't want to be found? What if seeing them upsets Dad even more? Or what if it helps him? What if meeting them again reminds him that they're real people, not characters in his nightmares?" "I really don't think we should pursue this." Her resistance was telling. If Sophia truly believed that her birth family was alive and well, why wouldn't she want to reconnect with them, unless she knew they weren't alive and well? That evening, I made a decision that would change everything. I called a private investigator. "I need you to find information about a family named Henderson," I told him. "They lived in Millbrook, Georgia in 1993. "What kind of information?" "I need to know what happened to them, all of them." The investigator, a man named David Chen, called me back 2 days later. "Mrs. Washington, I found the information you requested about the Henderson family, but I'm afraid it's not good news. Tell me, James and Maria Henderson and their 3 children were murdered in their home on October 23, 1993. It was a home invasion robbery. The case was never solved." Even though I had been expecting this confirmation, hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way that reading the newspaper clippings hadn't. All of them? All except the youngest child, a baby girl named Sophia, who had been placed for adoption 3 weeks earlier. "Do you know who adopted her?" "The records are sealed, but I can tell you that the adoption was handled by Loving Arms Agency in Atlanta. Loving Arms Agency, the same agency we had used to adopt Sophia. Mr. Chen, there's something else I need to tell you. Someone else has been investigating this same case." "What do you mean?" "I think my daughter already knows about the murders. I think she's been investigating them herself. That would explain why some of the people I contacted seemed nervous about discussing the case. If someone else has been asking questions, can you find out who?" "I can try. But Mrs. Washington, if your daughter already knows about the murders, you need to be very careful. This is a dangerous situation." While I waited for more information, I started paying closer attention to Robert's episodes. Instead of dismissing them as Alzheimer's delusions, I listened carefully to every detail. And the more I listened, the more convinced I became that Robert was telling the truth. He knew things that only the killer would know. The layout of the Henderson house. The fact that Maria had been making tea when he arrived. The way James had tried to defend his family with a baseball bat. But the most convincing detail was something Robert mentioned during one of his more lucid moments. "I buried the gun in our backyard," he said quietly one evening as we sat on our porch. "Under the oak tree. I was going to throw it in the river, but I was afraid someone would see me." "What gun, Robert?" "The one I used to kill the Hendersons. It's still there, wrapped in plastic, 3 feet down." I stared at him. "Robert, that's not real. You didn't kill anyone." "Then why do I remember burying it? Why do I remember the weight of the dirt on the shovel? Why do I remember thinking that if anyone ever found it, our life would be over?" That night, after Robert had gone to sleep, I went into our backyard with a flashlight and a shovel. The oak tree was old, probably planted when the house was built in the 1980s. If Robert had buried something under it 30 years ago, it would be deep by now. I started digging. 3 feet down, just as Robert had said, I hit something hard. Plastic, wrapped around something heavy and metallic. I pulled it out of the ground with shaking hands and unwrapped it under the beam of my flashlight. It was a gun, a .38 revolver, old but well preserved in its plastic wrapping. I sat there in my backyard at midnight, holding the weapon my husband had used to murder an entire family, and finally accepted the truth. Robert was a killer. Sophia was the daughter of his victims. And our entire life together was built on blood and lies. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what I discovered when I got back inside and found Sophia sitting at my kitchen table, waiting for me. "Find what you were looking for?" she asked quietly. I was still holding the gun, still covered in dirt from digging. There was no point in lying. "How long have you known?" I asked. "I've been watching you for weeks, Mom. Ever since you started acting suspicious. I knew you were getting close to the truth." "No. How long have you known about what your father did?" Sophia smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. It was cold, calculating, satisfied. "I've known for 2 years, Mom. Ever since Dad started confessing in his sleep." Sophia poured herself a cup of coffee like we were having a normal conversation instead of discussing mass murder. "Sit down, Mom. We need to talk." I sat across from her at the kitchen table, the gun still in my hands, dirt still under my fingernails. 2 years ago, Dad started having nightmares. Really vivid, detailed nightmares about killing my birth family. At first, I thought they were just dreams. But then I started paying attention to the details. What kind of details? He knew things he shouldn't have known. The layout of the house, the names of my siblings, the fact that my mother was pregnant when they gave me up. Pregnant? She miscarried 2 weeks after the adoption. The stress of giving me away caused her to lose the baby. Dad knew about that pregnancy, Mom. How could he know unless he had been there? I felt sick. Robert hadn't just killed Sophia's family. He had killed her unborn sibling, too. So I started recording his confessions. Every episode, every nightmare, every confused rambling. I have hours of audio, Mom. Hours of your husband describing in perfect detail how he murdered my entire family. Why didn't you go to the police? Because I needed more than just the confused ramblings of an Alzheimer's patient. I needed proof. So I hired my own investigator. Your own investigator? A woman named Sarah Martinez. She's been working the case for 18 months. She confirmed everything Dad said in his confessions. How much do you know? Everything. I know Dad drove to Millbrook on October 23, 1993. I know he shot my father on the front porch. I know he killed my mother and brothers inside the house. I know he staged it to look like a robbery. And you know about the gun. I've known about that gun for months. I watched you dig it up tonight. I've been waiting for you to find it. Sophia pulled out her phone and played an audio recording. Robert's voice, clear and detailed, describing the murders. "I shot James first, right through the heart. He dropped like a stone. Maria started screaming, so I shot her next. The boys tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. I had to kill them all. I couldn't leave any witnesses. I listened to my husband's voice describing the systematic murder of an entire family, and I finally understood the full scope of what we were dealing with. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "I want justice." "You want revenge?" "I want both." Sophia leaned forward, her eyes intense. "My birth parents were good people, Mom. They were poor, but they were good. They gave me up because they thought I would have a better life with you, and your husband murdered them for it. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to make sure Dad pays for what he did, and I'm going to make sure you understand the cost of the life you've been living." "I didn't know, Sophia. I swear to you I had no idea. But you benefited from it. You lived in a house paid for with blood money. You raised me on the graves of my real family. You may not have pulled the trigger, but you're not innocent." I stared at my daughter, this woman I had raised and loved for 30 years, and realized she was right. Even if I hadn't known the truth, I had benefited from Robert's crimes every single day. "So what's your plan?" "Dad is going to confess, publicly, to the police, to the media, to everyone. He's going to admit what he did and face the consequences. He has Alzheimer's, Sophia. No court would convict him now. Then he'll die in prison. Either way, the truth comes out." "And what about me?" "That depends on you, Mom. Are you going to help me get justice for my family, or are you going to protect the man who murdered them?" I looked at the gun in my hands, this piece of evidence that proved my husband was a killer. I thought about the Henderson family, about the life they should have had, about the children who never got to grow up, and I thought about Sophia, about the woman she had become despite being raised by her family's murderer. "What do you need me to do?" Sophia smiled, and for the first time in our conversation, it looked genuine. "I need you to help me get Dad to confess, on camera, with enough detail that no one can dismiss it as Alzheimer's delusion." "Oh, how?" "We're going to take him to Millbrook, to the house where it happened. Being there will trigger his memories, make them more vivid and detailed." "The house is still there?" "It's been abandoned since the murders. The property was inherited by distant relatives who lived out of state. They never bothered to sell it or tear it down. It just sits there, a monument to tragedy." I thought about Robert's condition, about how certain places and objects could trigger powerful memories in Alzheimer's patients. "You think being in that house will make him remember everything clearly?" "I think being in that house will make him relive it. And when he does, I'll be recording every word." "And then?" "And then we take the recording to the police, along with the gun, the investigator's report, and 30 years of evidence that your husband has been living a lie." I sat there in my kitchen, holding the murder weapon, listening to my daughter plan to destroy the man who had raised her, and I realized I had a choice to make. I could protect Robert, the man I had loved for 35 years, the man who had given me the life I had always wanted. Or I could help Sophia get justice for the family she had never known, the family whose blood had paid for our happiness. "When do we go to Millbrook?" I asked. Sophia's smile widened. "Tomorrow." The next morning, I told Robert we were going for a drive. He was having a good day, alert and conversational, but I could see the confusion lurking behind his eyes. "Where are we going?" he asked as we got into Sophia's car. "Just for a ride," Sophia replied from the driver's seat. "I thought you might like to see some of the places you used to work." I sat in the passenger seat, my stomach churning with anxiety. Sophia had hidden cameras throughout the car, tiny devices that would record everything Robert said and did. The drive to Millbrook took about 2 hours. Robert dozed for most of it, but as we got closer to the town, he started getting agitated. "This place looks familiar," he said, staring out the window at the rural landscape. "Does it?" Sophia asked casually. "Have you been here before?" "I think so, but I can't remember why." We drove through the small town center, past the courthouse and the diner and the gas station. Everything looked exactly as it had 30 years ago, frozen in time. Finally, Sophia turned down a dirt road that led to a cluster of old houses. At the end of the road sat a small, run-down house with boarded windows and an overgrown yard. "This is it," Sophia said quietly. Robert stared at the house, and I could see recognition dawning in his eyes. "I know this place," he whispered. "Tell me about it," Sophia said, turning on her phone's recording app. This is where they lived. The Hendersons. This is where I... Robert trailed off, but his eyes were fixed on the front porch. Where you what, Dad? Where I killed them. Sophia and I exchanged glances. Robert's voice was clear, lucid, certain. Tell me what happened, Sophia said gently. I came here on a Saturday night, October 23rd, 1993. I had a gun. I was going to scare them, make them understand that they couldn't take you away from us. Take who away? You, Sophia, our daughter. They wanted you back. Robert got out of the car and walked toward the house like he was in a trance. Sophia and I followed, her phone still recording. James was waiting for me on the porch, Robert continued, his voice getting stronger. He had a baseball bat. He called me a child stealer. Robert walked up the front steps and stood where James Henderson had died 30 years earlier. I shot him right here, right through the heart. He fell backward, hit his head on the doorframe. And then what happened? Maria came running. She was screaming, asking what I had done, so I shot her too. Robert walked through the front door, which hung open on broken hinges. The boys were in the living room, watching TV. When they heard the gunshots, they tried to run. But there was nowhere to go. We followed Robert into the abandoned house. It was dark, musty, filled with debris and graffiti, but Robert moved through it like he had been there yesterday. Michael tried to protect David. He stood in front of his little brother and begged me not to hurt him. But I couldn't leave any witnesses. Robert's voice broke as he described killing the children. David tried to hide under the couch. He was crying, calling for his mama. But I found him. I shot him while he was hiding. Sophia was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she listened to Robert describe the murder of her siblings. And then, what did you do? I made it look like a robbery. Took some jewelry, some cash, broke a few things. I wanted the police to think it was a home invasion. What did you do with the gun? I took it home, buried it in our backyard under the oak tree. I was going to throw it in the river, but I was afraid someone would see me. Robert turned to look at Sophia, and for a moment his eyes were completely clear. I'm sorry, he said. I'm so sorry for what I took from you. I'm sorry you never got to know your real family. Why did you do it? Because I loved you. Because I couldn't bear to lose you. Because I was selfish and scared and I thought I could get away with it. And you did get away with it. For 30 years. Yes. For 30 years I lived with the blood of your family on my hands. And every day, I watched you grow up, and I was grateful for what I had done. Even knowing it was evil, I was grateful. Sophia stopped recording and put her phone away. Thank you for telling me the truth. What happens now? Sophia was quiet for a long moment, staring at the house where her birth family had died. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the war between justice and mercy, between the daughter who wanted revenge and the daughter who still loved the man who had raised her. I don't know, she said finally. I honestly don't know. The drive back to Atlanta was silent, except for Robert's quiet crying. He seemed to understand that his confession had changed everything, that our family would never be the same. But as we pulled into our driveway, Sophia made an unexpected announcement. I'm not going to the police. What? I turned to stare at her. I'm not pressing charges. I'm not turning in the recording. Sophia, what are you talking about? This is what you wanted. Justice for your family. I thought it was what I wanted. But sitting in that house, listening to Dad describe killing my brothers, I realized something. What? Sending him to prison won't bring them back. It won't give me the childhood I lost or the family I never knew. It will just destroy what's left of the family I do have. Robert looked at her in shock. Sophia, I murdered your parents. I murdered your brothers. I deserve to be punished. You've been punishing yourself for 30 years. I can see it in your eyes, in the way you carry yourself. You've been living in hell since the night you pulled that trigger. That's not enough. That's not justice. Maybe not, but it's mercy. And maybe mercy is more important than justice. I stared at my daughter, this woman who had every right to hate us, who had every reason to want revenge, and I was amazed by her capacity for forgiveness. But I could also see that her decision wasn't final. She was struggling, torn between her desire for justice and her love for the man who had raised her. Over the next few weeks, Sophia wrestled with her choice. Some days she would call me, crying, saying she had changed her mind and was going to the police. Other days, she would come over and sit with Robert, holding his hand while he told her stories about her childhood. "I keep thinking about my brothers," she told me one afternoon. "Michael and David. They never got to grow up, never got to have families of their own. Don't they deserve justice?" "They deserve to be remembered," I said. "They deserve to have their story told. But does sending your father to prison really honor their memory? I don't know. I honestly don't know." The decision was taken out of her hands 3 months later, when Robert's condition took a sudden turn for the worse. The stress of his confession, combined with the progression of his Alzheimer's, caused a rapid decline in his health. He was hospitalized with pneumonia and never recovered. Sophia spent his final days at his bedside, holding his hand and telling him about her children, about her life, about the woman she had become. "Do you forgive me?" he asked her during one of his last lucid moments. "I forgive you," she whispered. "I don't understand how or why, but I forgive you. Thank you. Now I can rest." Robert died peacefully in his sleep on a Tuesday morning in March, exactly 1 year after his confession in the abandoned house. His last words, spoken to Sophia the night before, were, "Thank you for forgiving me. Now I can rest." The funeral was small, attended only by immediate family and a few close friends who didn't know the full truth about Robert's past. Sophia delivered the eulogy, speaking about the man who had raised her with love and devotion, while also acknowledging the terrible things he had done. "My father was not a perfect man," she said. "He made choices that caused immeasurable pain and suffering. But he was also capable of great love, and that love shaped me into the person I am today. I choose to remember both sides of who he was, because that's what it means to love someone completely." After the service, Sophia and I visited the Henderson family graves for the first time together. "I brought them flowers," Sophia said, placing bouquets on each headstone, "and I brought someone I wanted them to meet." She knelt beside her birth parents' graves and spoke to them as if they were listening. "Mom, Dad, this is Eleanor. She's the woman who raised me after you were gone. She didn't know what happened to you, but she loved me like I was her own daughter. I thought you should meet her." I knelt beside Sophia and placed my own flowers on the graves. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm sorry for what my husband did to you. I'm sorry I didn't know the truth, and I'm sorry your daughter had to grow up without you." We sat there in the cemetery for a long time, 3 generations of women connected by tragedy and love. "Do you think they can hear us?" I asked. "I hope so. I hope they know that their daughter turned out okay, that she's loved and happy and surrounded by people who care about her, even after everything that happened. Especially after everything that happened, because it means love really can survive anything, even murder, even 30 years of lies." As we walked back to the car, Sophia took my hand. "I have something to tell you," she said. "What?" "Marcus and I are thinking about having another baby." I stopped walking and stared at her. "Really? Really? We want Emma and Tyler to have a sibling. And we want to bring new life into our family, life that isn't touched by the darkness of the past. What will you tell the new baby about their grandfather?" "The truth. Age-appropriate versions of it, but the truth. That he did something terrible, but that he also loved our family fiercely. That people are complicated, and that love and evil can exist in the same person." "And you're okay with that? With raising a child who will know their grandfather was a murderer?" "I'm okay with raising a child who understands that families are messy and complicated, and sometimes built on tragedy. Because that child will also understand the power of forgiveness and the importance of truth." 6 months later, Sophia gave birth to a healthy baby girl. They named her Hope. "Hope for the future," Sophia explained when I asked about the name. "Hope that our family can heal. Hope that love really is stronger than hate." Holding my new granddaughter in my arms, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. The lies, the truth, the pain, the forgiveness. It wasn't the family I had imagined when Robert and I first adopted Sophia 30 years earlier. But it was real, honest, built on truth instead of secrets. And maybe that was enough. Today, 5 years after Robert's death, our family has found a new kind of normal. Sophia and Marcus have 3 children now: Emma, Tyler, and Little Hope. The older children know age-appropriate versions of their family history. They understand that their grandfather did something very bad, but that their mother chose to forgive him because that's what love sometimes requires. Emma, now 13, asked me recently, "Grandma, do you think Grandpa Robert was evil?" I thought carefully before answering. I think Grandpa Robert was a man who did an evil thing because he was afraid of losing someone he loved. That doesn't excuse what he did, but it helps us understand why he did it. And you still loved him? Even after you found out? Love is complicated, sweetheart. Sometimes we love people despite their flaws, not because of their perfection. And sometimes loving someone means holding them accountable for their actions while still caring about them as a person. Is that why Mom forgave him? Your mom forgave him because she understood that holding on to anger would only create more pain. She chose healing over hatred. Do you think my other grandparents would have forgiven him too? I don't know. But I hope they would have been proud of the woman their daughter became. I hope they would have seen that their sacrifice wasn't meaningless because it led to you and Tyler and Hope. Sophia has become an advocate for restorative justice, working with families affected by violent crime to find paths toward healing and forgiveness. She speaks at conferences and writes articles about her experience, always emphasizing that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing harmful behavior. Forgiveness is not about the person who hurt you, she often says. It's about freeing yourself from the burden of carrying their actions. It's about choosing to build something positive from something negative. She's also working on a book about our family's story with the working title Blood and Grace, A Family's Journey from Murder to Mercy. I want people to understand that families are complicated, she told me when she started writing. I want them to know that love can survive even the worst truths, but only if we're willing to face those truths honestly. Marcus has been her partner in all of this, supporting her advocacy work and helping to raise their children with an understanding of both their family's darkness and its capacity for light. The kids need to know where they come from, he said recently. All of it, the good and the bad, because that's what makes them who they are. As for me, I've spent these 5 years learning to live with the knowledge of what my husband did. Some days are harder than others. Some days I look at Sophia and see the daughter of the people Robert murdered, and the guilt threatens to overwhelm me. But most days, I see the woman I helped raise, the mother who chose forgiveness over vengeance, the person who turned tragedy into purpose. And I'm grateful. Grateful for the 30 years we had as a family, even if they were built on lies. Grateful for the truth, even though it was painful. And grateful for the opportunity to rebuild our relationships on a foundation of honesty. We visit the Henderson family graves every year on the anniversary of their deaths. We bring flowers, we tell them about Sophia's life, and we ask for their forgiveness. I hope they know, Sophia said during our most recent visit, that their daughter is loved, that she's happy, that she's making a difference in the world. I think they do know, I replied. And I think they're proud of the woman you've become, even though I forgave their killer, especially because you forgave their killer, because that took more strength and courage than revenge ever could. Last month, Sophia told me she's pregnant again. Another child, another chance for our family to grow and heal. What will you name this one? I asked. If it's a boy, we're thinking about James, after my birth father. And if it's a girl, Maria, after my birth mother. I started crying when she told me this. The idea that Sophia would honor her murdered parents by naming her children after them seemed like the ultimate act of love and forgiveness. Do you think that's appropriate? She asked, seeing my tears. I think it's beautiful. I think it's a way of making sure they're never forgotten. That's what I hope. I want my children to know about all their grandparents, the ones who raised me and the ones who gave me life. I want them to understand that family isn't just about blood or just about choice. It's about love in all its complicated forms. As I write this, I'm 73 years old. Sophia is 35. Emma is 13. Tyler is 11. And Hope is 5. And there's another baby on the way. A child who will grow up knowing the full truth about their family from the beginning. It's not the story I would have chosen for us. It's not the happy ending I dreamed of when Robert and I first decided to adopt a child. But it's our story. Honest, complicated, painful, and beautiful. And maybe that's what real families are. Not perfect people living perfect lives, but flawed people choosing to love each other despite their imperfections. My name is Eleanor Washington. I discovered that my family was built on blood and lies. But I also discovered that love, real love, can survive even the worst truths. And sometimes that's enough. If this story touched you, if it made you think about your own family and your own capacity for forgiveness, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Where are you listening from today? Have you ever had to forgive the unforgivable? What would you have done in my situation? Could you have forgiven your daughter for planning your death? Could you have lived with the knowledge that your husband was a murderer? Let me know your thoughts below. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about the complicated nature of family and love and the terrible things we do for the people we care about, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. These stories matter, and your support helps me keep telling them. A super thanks would mean the world to me and helps me continue bringing you these powerful stories every week. Remember, family isn't just about blood or just about choice. It's about love, forgiveness, and the courage to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.